Welcome to AppStories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Mint Mobile. I'm John Voorhees, and with me, of course, is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. I'm back. How are you?
You are back and badder than ever, I think, right?
I think I'm back and just pretty similar to before. I don't know. I'm
right.
better. I'm 10 now, I guess. I spend a lot of time at the beach. So
You should take a lot of selfies and show those off. I'll put them in the show notes and let everybody know. Critique your tan.
Sunscreen for tattoos is not fun. Like you gotta be extra careful to preserve.
Oh, I bet you do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have how you have different what's it called, different degrees of sunscreen. You can buy different levels of protection, and so I had to buy a stronger one. I gotta use a stronger one just for the tattoos. That's for the areas of my skin where I have tattoos, especially the colored ones. And then I can use a lower protection thing for the rest of my body. But it's a whole thing in the morning before going to the beach. I gotta spend at least 5 minutes making sure that I am fully protected.
Wow. So do you end up using the stronger protection for your whole arm or just the tattoos? I'm just wondering whether you have a suntan that is everywhere except your tattoos, or if you kind of evening it out.
So my right arm, I basically use it on the entire arm because I got a sleeve, right? With the from the hand up on to my elbow. And then I have an empty area that I gotta fill out at some point, and then I have my dogs on the upper arm, so I basically use it on the whole thing. But it's not like it doesn't you can still see that it's 10, just slightly less than the other arm, I guess. It's kind of a weird effect, honestly.
All right. Well, I hope that not only are you tan, but you're at least a little better rested after having spent a few days at the beach.
Yes, very much so, and it was necessary because I came back and I immediately started working on my iOS review. It's not like I was not working on it before, but before I was just taking notes notes without any organization whatsoever. So I came back and I sat down and I spent 3 days just meticulously moving my notes from Apple Notes to MindNode. So all that giant pile, messy notes, I took them and I created a structure for them and chapters and sections and subsections. So now I have a mind map, and I think I'm pretty much in a position where I can actually start writing now.
Yeah, that's great.
I think this year is a bit different, of course, because what I've done now, this thinking and playing around with the beta and just thinking about ideas behind the new version of iOS, I usually do in San Jose. We talked about this before. So it was a kind of different process than usual. But I think I'm fine, and I'm in a good position now, I think, in terms of I can now start writing. I think I have a few angles I can explore as sort of core ideas behind the review. So slightly different timeline, slightly different setup coming into this. But I think I'm in a good place right now, so I think I can actually start writing.
Oh, that's terrific. Well, it's good to have you back, Federico. We had a nice episode last week with Mike Hurley.
It was very nice.
Yeah, it was nice to have Mike on. You and I have a pretty good feel for how Relay operates since Mike and Steven are close friends. But, we don't really dig into the nitty-gritty that much. And what Mike does is a little different from what Steven does. And it was just, to me, it was just very interesting to see what he does and how he gets it done. Because in the end of the day, what we do is kind of similar to what Relay does, but not really, in the sense that, we're just a very small team and they've got this large array of shows with all the people who host them. And so it requires different tools. And it was kind of interesting to see what he uses to kind of manage all that.
The biggest surprise for me was that Mike is no longer using Pipedrive, but instead they're using Airtable.
Right.
I was very surprised because I remember Mike bragging about Pipedrive years ago. Everybody would ask him, "What's that icon?" And he would say, "Oh, this is Pipedrive, and it's the sales management tool." And it actually looked pretty cool. He showed me once what Pipedrive looked like, and I was very surprised to hear that they're now using Airtable. Airtable is one of those services that every time I look at it, it's like Notion. in a way. Every time I look
Mm-hmm.
at how people are using it, I'm like, oh, that's very cool. That's super neat. And then I try to use it, and it doesn't look as cool as the other people's setups,
Right.
So
Right.
yeah,
Well, and on top of that, the iPad app is just not that great, as we
that's
talked
probably
about a little bit.
that's probably my problem. Same with Notion. I think people using it are primarily using it like on a desktop computer, and so it's easier for them to make those documents look good. And on iPad, as Mike mentioned, like some of the views you cannot use at all. And I know that Mike also said, this is like follow up on last week's episode. He mentioned how Airtable is usable in the iPad's version of Safari
Right.
because of desktop class browsing. And I don't know about you, John, but I've sort of come back to using native apps like Google Docs. I reinstalled Docs on my like the Docs app on my iPad because the
Mm-hmm.
using Google Docs in Safari, there's still some weird things happening with like text selection and scrolling and copying and pasting text. And even though
Yeah.
I don't love it, those things don't happen for me in the native app.
Yeah, I use the native apps when it comes to the Google services too, and I don't like them a lot, but they are better than using the web versions. I'm just trying as much as I can to stay away from the Google services, which is why you and I are now using Notes for our show notes for this show,
Mm-hmm.
which works pretty well, especially since it's just the two of us. I think that's the same kind of thing. It doesn't scale super well with more people involved. I know that it's a very different process for you guys on Connected and that sort of thing, which we talked about too.
Yeah, the connected show notes document is a whole thing. Just like we often need like to actually see in real time who's editing what, because as we're doing the show, we do the show
Right.
live, so there's people listening, and we often need to like we say something to each other, and we need to be able to see that in real time in the document. And also the document is like a living document because like all the annual picks and the rickies, they live in there, so we need to make sure that they always stay in there. So revision history is something that is really important for us, and all that kind of stuff. So there's a place for
Yes.
Google Docs, but I think you and I are, and I mean, I also use Apple Notes with Ryan for Adapt, and I think for two
Right.
people working on these types of podcasts, I think Notes is totally okay.
Yeah, and I think the difference for us is definitely that you and I are rarely in these notes at the exact same time. We just work on it whenever one of us has time and let the other know that we've made a change. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Mint Mobile, the folks who can cut your wireless bill to just $15 a month with their futuristic approach to wireless. This is the easiest activation process I've ever tried with a mobile service, bar none. Mint Mobile sent me a card. It's like a little credit card. I popped the SIM chip out of this card, copied the activation code into a web form on their website, and then I just slipped the SIM chip into my phone and I was up and running. It took maybe 5 minutes at the most. It's really fantastic that way. And here's the thing, the coverage has been rock solid wherever I've gone, and it's substantially cheaper compared to what I've been paying. If you're still using one of the big wireless providers this year, have you asked yourself what you're paying for? Between expensive retail stores, inflated prices, and hidden fees, there's ample opportunity to take advantage of paying customers like you. This is where Mint Mobile comes in. Mint Mobile provides the same premium network coverage you're used to, but at a fraction of the cost because everything is online. Mint Mobile saves on retail locations and overhead, then passes those savings directly to you, making it easy for you to cut your wireless bill down to just $15 a month. Every plan comes with unlimited nationwide talk and text, and you can stop paying for unlimited data that you'll never use. Just choose between plans with 3, 8, or 12 gigabytes of 4G LTE data. Plus, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone number along with all your existing contacts. Just ditch your old wireless bill and start saving with Mint Mobile today. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door free, go to mintmobile.com/appstories. Again, that's mintmobile.com/appstories so they know you came from the show. Go there now. Cut your wireless bill to just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/appstories. Our thanks to Mint Mobile for their support of the show. All right, Federico, why don't we dive into our topic for this week? And that is we're doing a pick two. We haven't done one of these in a
Classic
long time.
episode today.
Classic episode. Pick two. We go a little deeper on a couple of apps that maybe we haven't talked about in a while, maybe we haven't used in a while, just something that we think people should know about. And I think we've kind of an interesting mix of apps today. So we've got, it's right there in the title. We have Castro and we have Grammarly, and your pick is Castro. So I'll let you kick it off.
Yes. So Castro is one of those apps that I've been meaning to check out properly for a while. Now, if you know me, you know that I have a very particular relationship, I guess, with some types of apps like task managers and note-taking apps and podcast clients, in that I really like to switch things up every once in a while and try something else. But Castro, for some reason, I never actually spent time using it, even though it always intrigued me for a couple of reasons. First is the design, and the other is the approach that they have that the app offers when it comes to managing episodes. So the reason why I wanted to play around with Castro now is, so I was using Overcast, and then I switched to Apple Podcasts right after WWDC, because I wanted to play around with the widget. And the widget is fine and it's really well done. But my main problem with Apple Podcasts is that after a long time using Overcast, I can tell the difference when it comes to audio effects. Some podcasts that I was used to listening to in Overcast, they were just sounding so much worse in Apple Podcasts because of the lack of were Overcast called Voice Boost and Smart Speed.
Right.
So everything was a bit slower with with many more pauses between sentences, and
Sure.
a lot of podcasts were much quieter, like at a lower volume. And so
Right.
I thought, well, I gotta go back to Overcast. But also something else happened at the same time. Ryan was he wrote about Castro, I believe, in the monthly log or the MacStories weekly newsletter for Club MacStories members. And so that combination of things pushed me to think, well, actually, maybe now, I'm in between podcast clients. I might as well give Castro a try. And so I downloaded Castro and I signed up for the monthly Castro Plus subscription plan. So just to check it out for a few weeks and see what it was like. And I can tell you, John, that I really, really like this app, and I really like just how this app has changed over the years. So the main feature of Castro is that, unlike other podcast clients where you have your list of subscriptions and then you have in Apple Podcasts, you have the Listen Now page, which tries to show you the things that you're listening to and the things coming up in your up next queue. You also have podcast clients like Overcast, which are very much playlist based. So you either go in there and you pick the show that you want to listen to, and then you pick the episode, or you create a playlist and everything goes into the playlist, and so you use those. Castro, which is an iPhone-only app, uses drag and drop to let you add episodes to an inbox. So episodes come in, and you have a main sort of all episodes page, and you see that reverse chronological list of episodes. But then what you do is you can just pick and choose the episodes you want to listen to, and you add them to your inbox, to your queue. So this inbox approach, I realized that it works really well for me because I like to subscribe to a lot of podcasts. Some of them I listen to every episode they put out. Others, I like to pick and choose the episodes I want to listen to. Some of them, I may listen to an episode and then not listen for a few weeks, and then I'll pick it up again. And this usually happens with music podcasts where they talk about a specific artist or a specific album, or interview podcasts where maybe they interview specific game developers, stuff like that. That is not it's very topical, and so I can pick and choose the episodes that I want to listen to. And so because of this, it works really well to have this kind of queue and inbox approach, because I can just take whatever comes in, and if it's Upgrade or Cortex or What's something else that I listen to every single episode? Lately, I've been really into Poke Sports, which is this Pokemon podcast. So like those ones, I will absolutely every new episode I will add it to my queue. But other stuff like music podcasts or video game podcasts or programming podcasts about like stuff like Swift UI and Catalyst, for example, I will pick and choose and I will add them to my inbox. And what I also like about the inbox is that it's very easy to add episodes to that queue in Castro. You don't have to fidget with like creating a playlist and setting up the rules for the playlist. You either use drag and drop or you tap on an episode and you tap the button and it works like in music. You can add it to the top of your queue or you can add it to the bottom of your queue. And then in the queue you can use drag and drop and it's very visual, it's very tactile. You can drag and drop and rearrange episodes. And it's very fun and it's very easy to use and it's very it's delightful to do on it. It's a small thing, but using drag and drop in Castro is really well done.
Yeah, let me interrupt you for just 1 second because I think that the inbox is particularly suited to people stuck at home during a pandemic because, one of the things I've noticed since I've been going out a lot less is I don't have the opportunity to listen to shows when I'm out driving around running errands. And a lot of people have traditionally listened to podcasts while they're commuting too. And as a result of that, though, I find that I have to be a little more choosy. And it's a little bit like what you're describing, which is there are a lot of shows now, more than ever, really, where I'm picking and choosing which episode I listen to. There are ones that I don't miss, but having an inbox like that where you can kind of decide which ones are going into your queue or not is really well suited to that kind of thing where you have a more irregular schedule and you don't necessarily have big blocks of time like a commute to listen to stuff.
Yeah, and it's nice because in the main inbox, which is where all episodes come in, you can see all episodes or you can break it down by specific podcasts. Just like a toolbar at the top that lets you filter the inbox. And then from the inbox, you can add it to the queue. And it's like this it's a very sort of integrated approach that really makes sense. It's a very specific approach and it's very different from all other podcast clients. But if that sort of mindset works for you, I think it works really beautifully and it like instantly clicks. And I don't know, it works really well for me. Now, that's the main thing. And I think really for a lot of people, that's the main reason why they don't like using Castro, because it's very opinionated, maybe is a good word to describe it. Like it's based on this approach and you got to accept this approach. Otherwise, it will not work for you. But this methodology, I realized in using Castro that it works really well for me and for my podcast listening habits. Like sometimes, for example, you or Mike will tell me, you got to listen to this specific chapter of this specific episode of this podcast. And I will do that. I will go look for that podcast and add the episode to my queue and listen to that chapter and then delete the episode. And Castro makes this really easy to do. Now, when it comes to the listening experience in Castro, obviously, there are some features that were inspired by Overcast. And I think this is true for a lot of other podcast clients that we cover. I think it's undeniable that Marco Arment inspired a lot of features like audio effects or, for example, sharing a podcast clip as a video on social networks, which is, both features Castro has. They have their own version of Smart Speed called Trim Silence, and they have their own voice boosting effect. They also have sharing that it works pretty much like Overcast in that you can clip a specific portion of an episode and you have like this video controls and you can trim it and you can choose the video format and then you can share it. So it's undeniable that Overcast influenced a lot of these features in the podcast market. I think we all know this, and credit to Marco Arment for coming up with these features originally. Now, for a long time, I thought these podcast clients that were inspired by, the copied these Overcast features, and specifically I'm talking about the audio effects. I thought, well, they're not going to be as good as Overcast and they're probably going to be unlistenable. And when it comes to the audio effects in Castro, while I still think that Smart Speed and Voice Boost are superior to the version in Castro, I think Castro's Smart Speed, so Trim Silence and the voice boosting effect, I think they're pretty good, actually. I think they're good enough. And the Trim Silence, it sounded a little strange maybe initially, but as Ryan told me weeks ago, I got used to it like after like 30 minutes, and it was totally fine, and I never noticed it again. And that was my experience as well. So the audio effects in Castro, overcasts may be still superior, but they are good enough. I would say they are good enough in
Right.
Castro as well. What I do love about Castro is the fact that you can easily see how much time the trim silence feature has saved you when listening to a podcast, when listening to an episode, right there in the now playing screen. The now
Oh,
playing
that's nice.
screen in Castro is very different from all other now playing screens in other podcast clients, which are usually like inspired by the now playing screen of music, by Apple's own music app. This one is really different. So you access the now playing screen. It's like a card that slides up from the bottom of the screen, and it has two main pages, one for the artwork and the other for the show settings. And each one you can pull on either side to reveal additional information. So if you pull from the left side, you will see the show notes, and if you pull from the right side, you will see the individual show settings, where like you can control how episodes are downloaded, all that kind of stuff. You can also access settings such as mixing to mono, which is useful for podcasts that are mixed in stereo and they pan like the left and right channels, which makes them kind of weird to listen to.
Yeah, it
Because
does.
all podcasts should be mixed to mono. And so if you ever come across a podcast that is mixed in stereo, you can force it to mono in Castro. But yeah, the now playing screen where you choose the audio effects, it's really well done because it shows you like in this episode, you've saved 5 minutes. And that sort of reinforces, it's like a positive feedback loop that tells you you're paying, because this is a Castro Plus feature, you're paying
Right.
as a Castro Plus subscriber, and this screen shows you as you listen how much time
What
you've
you're
saved,
getting.
what you're
Yeah.
getting out of your investment. So I think it's a very smart decision there. Obviously, the app is beautiful. I mean, I don't need to tell you this. You can just take a look at the screenshots. The typography, the colors, the bold aesthetic, it works really well for me. Castro looks modern. It's tasteful. It's elegant. It's bold. It's probably a small thing, but I love the design of the screen that sells you on the Castro Plus subscription. Like, it's so well done. The colors and the typography and the bold fonts and the marketing copy. I know it's a small thing, it's a small detail, but it's so well done. Like, it makes you want to pay almost. What else? There's a lot of different custom icons that you can choose from. So that's nice. I put there's a heart version that I put on my home screen with like a pink color. It looks really lovely. And also Castro, we covered this on the website on MacStories. It was recently updated with modern shortcuts integration. So you can do a lot of things, including subscribing to shows and searching for episodes. It's really nice to see this kind of deep and modern integration with the Shortcuts app and with parameters. So thumbs up for that. I also want to mention the Watch app. So I'm not the type of person who goes out running with just the watch and wants to listen to episodes on the watch.
That's
But
what I do.
that's what you do. And I think if you ever try Castro, you will like just the design of the watch app. Very simple, very minimal. And I like that there's a badge in the now playing screen on the watch that tells you, like, in plain text, 25 minutes remaining. It doesn't show you like
okay.
a circle. It actually gives you a small
Right.
badge with a number, which I always prefer because it's a lot more obvious. And because of the inbox and queue approach, it's also very easy to understand what's going on when you're syncing episodes to the watch, because
Okay.
the sync to watch screen is a replica of what you have in your queue. So it's like
Sure.
there's a one-to-one match there. You don't have to fiddle with complex settings. You can just say, okay, here are all the episodes I want to listen to. Do I want to sync them to my watch? And you can do so manually, or you can enable an automatic syncing feature that takes whatever is in your queue and syncs it to the watch. And it works really well. And the watch app is fast, it's modern, and a very nice design. And before talking about some of the downsides of Castro, just a bunch of like other extra nice things. I mentioned mix to mono, AirPlay 2 integration. So Castro is one of the few podcast clients that allows you to stream audio to multiple HomePods and multiple AirPlay speakers at the same time. When you tap the AirPlay control icon, you will get in the AirPlay screen that comes up, you will get the check boxes. So you can select multiple speakers at once. So if you, like me, have multiple HomePods, you can send audio to multiple HomePods at the same time. There's a history page that shows you which episodes you've listened to and when. So I don't know why, but I think it's pretty cool that you have like a log of the episodes you listen to, and you can be like, oh, on July 7th, I listened to Upgrade or whatever. So that's cool. And finally, I want to mention sideloads. So sideloading episodes, again, another Overcast feature. In Overcast, you can sideload episodes with web uploads. So if you have a file, you can go to an Overcast webpage, and you can log in with your account, and you can upload a file, and that file will be downloaded by Overcast. It's different in Castro, in that sideloading can happen in a bunch of different ways. The easiest way is you can just drop a file in iCloud Drive in the Files app. So that's so much easier to do than going to Safari and uploading something. You can just drop a file in there. And you can just, whatever file you may have, you can just put it there and it'll work. But also, there's an action extension called Sideloading Castro. And I have discovered in doing research for this episode something incredible about sideloading stuff in Castro. You can take any YouTube video on youtube.com or the YouTube app on your phone, and you can use the action extension to sideload the audio of that video in Castro.
That's really cool.
Which is super cool. And of course, the design of the extension and the animation inside the extension is also very nicely done. But yeah, you can take any YouTube video and save just the audio part as a file in Castro. So really well done. Absolutely well done. Now, some of the things I don't like, there's no iPad version, which is, I no way around it. I don't like it. There should be one. Castro is an iPhone-only app, which I understand why, you want to start with the iPhone. The inbox and queue approach, and most people listen to podcasts on their iPhones. But it would be nice to have an iPad version as well, and especially now that iPad apps can run on the Mac, make it a universal type of deal would be super cool. Sometimes I want to listen to podcasts on my iPad. I'm one of those few weirdos that like to do that. And also something that is missing is full text search. So Overcast has an absolutely incredible full text search engine for searching not only like episode titles and descriptions, but also the show notes, which is just incredible because you can search for anything in your podcast library and you can find it. And this is missing from Castro. But otherwise, I've kept Castro on my home screen for the past couple of weeks. I really like it. The audio effects are cool. I like the fact that I can see, like, I got that sort of instant gratification going on in seeing how much time I'm saving with the trim silence, and it looks great. It's the kind of app that I get a little, I look when I use it, I look at it and I think, oh, this is so nice to look at, which is of course important to me.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I probably ought to revisit it because it has been a while since I've used Castro regularly. I used to cover a lot more of our stories for Castro on MacStories, but Ryan's been doing some of it more recently, and so I haven't had a reason for that. I haven't had that reason to dig in. So it's you've intrigued me. I think I'll give it a shot.
I can be convincing sometimes.
Yes, you have a way of getting me to spend money and download apps all the time. And you know what? That's why I try to pay it back. To pay it back as much as possible.
Don't act so innocent. I just spent like $100 on that charger that you wrote about last week in the newsletter. So
all it took was a 1-sentence link, and I cost you $100.
And I knew that it was your link because it's you covering these things. I know that it was you. It couldn't be Ryan. It's always you covering USB-C chargers. Has to be you.
Yes. I have an obsession for hubs and chargers and all sorts of weird accessories. Mm-hmm. All right, Federico, let's talk about Grammarly, because this is not an app that I think we've ever covered on the site, but it is something that I've been using. I've had a subscription since I think late 2017. And first of all, this is primarily a service. It's a grammar and spell check service that's web-based, but they do have apps. They've got a web app, a Mac app, a Safari extension, and then they have both an iPad app and then an iOS and iPad OS keyboard extension. So there's a lot of different tools here available. But before I dive into those, I wanted to talk about the pricing of this because first of all, it's expensive. I have not paid full price, I think, ever for it though. And I wanted to kind of highlight that at the get-go because it's easy to save money on Grammarly, and you should look out for the sales because full price, it's $30 a month or $20 a month if you pay quarterly or $12 a month if you pay annually. But right now, I think my price is right around $5 a month, which is a lot more reasonable. And that's because they do sales all the time. And when I get an email talking about a sale for Grammarly, I just sign up again and it extends my subscription because I find it really useful. It's just that at 30 a month particularly is kind of a lot. So there's a free tier two, which covers kind of the basics, the critical grammar and spell check type stuff. But the premium really adds some neat stuff. It adds like readability, vocabulary, writing style checks, and a plagiarism detector.
Plagiarism detector?
Yeah. It actually can compare your writing against a database of existing articles that's in some API somewhere and tell you whether it's been stolen from somewhere.
I mean, if you're plagiarizing someone, do you need to check that you're doing it?
No, but this is for if you're an editor. Like if you wanted to check if you were the one using this and wanted to check if I was plagiarizing, you could do it that way. Since we don't have that sort of operation, I don't ever use that service, but it's there. And I think, it could be useful for teachers maybe.
Right.
Editors,
yes.
That sort of thing.
That's genius, actually. I've done a complete turnaround on this feature in 15 seconds. Yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For if you're in that kind of role, it would work, but I don't use it on my own writing. They're also adding very soon, or else they just did, they're adding Google Docs support. So this works right inside of the Google Docs services, which is handy because that's a place a lot of people write. I don't as a general rule, but it's there if you want it. Now, I want to kind of dive into the features because one of the things that I like the most is that it lets you set up goals for your writing. And those have to do with kind of the formality and other things related to your writing. So let me give you an idea of this. I'm actually opening this up while I talk because if I go in here, it's pretty easy app to use. There's a button for new and you just start a new document. And all I ever do with this, it's like one of the last steps ever in working on an article is I will just copy it wholesale, the markdown, and drop it in here. I don't, it seems to want you to work inside this app a little bit. It has a place for a title and a place for the body and all that kind of stuff. I just drop everything to the body and get going. And it works perfectly well that way. And it handles markdown beautifully. It doesn't the markdown syntax does not trip it up. But when you get into the app, there's a goals section. If you click on the goals section, it's divided into 5 sections. There's audience, formality, domain, tone, and intent. So typically, audience is things like general, knowledgeable, and expert. So this is who are you writing for? I tend to set this to knowledgeable because most MacStories readers are knowledgeable about apps. I don't need to, worry about them not having to over-explain things.
They are knowledgeable. Yes.
Yeah. And then formality, you can have either informal, neutral, or formal. Definitely not formal. I usually have it set to informal or neutral. I've found informal works quite well. Then domain are things like academic, business, general, email, casual, and creative. I just put casual. Casual seems to work well for me. General would probably be fine too. Tone is kind of neat. Tone's interesting. It's got, and this I think might be billed as, it's a beta feature. They have neutral, confident, joyful, optimistic, friendly, urgent, analytical, and respectful, which is kind of interesting. And this one you can pick several. So I usually pick optimistic and friendly because I'd like to think my writing is optimistic and friendly.
Yeah, you are.
All right. And then the final thing is intent. And intent is also a beta feature. It lets you describe the kind of writing it is. Are you informing people, describing something, trying to convince somebody, or telling a story? And I usually, especially for reviews, just use describe. Seems to work pretty well. And I found over time using these particular settings, it tends to work well with my type of writing. And once you set those and hit, done, it will analyze your writing and give you an overall score based on a bunch of categories. And so, if you're having a good day, maybe you're in the 90s. If maybe, it was a rough day the day before, maybe you're down in the 80s or something. But it breaks it down into correctness, clarity, engagement, and delivery. And I really only ever focus on correctness more than anything else, because that is the section that catches things that are hard to see when you're proofreading your own writing. Things like maybe you're missing a comma, or maybe you wrote the word the twice in a row, or you spelled something wrong, or used the wrong form of a verb. That kind of stuff that can be easy to skip over when you're reading your own stuff. I always pay close attention to those. Now, it gets tripped up once in a while especially by technical stuff, technical words, or a lot of times maybe I'm describing a feature or a product or something by Apple, which has a very common name. Like, for instance, I'm talking about the music app. And throughout the article, sometimes music is capitalized and sometimes it's not, because I may not be talking about the app the whole time. And it'll say you have inconsistent capitalization. And so there are things to ignore, but it does a great job of catching kind of those strange little problems. I've found that the clarity section I've used more and more lately, because it seems like it's gotten a lot better from when I first started using this service. It'll do things like find really long sentences or sentences with a lot of modifiers and clauses and things hanging off of them, and give you suggestions on ways to break it up or rearrange it in a way that makes more sense. And I found it's gotten quite good at that. So I've been paying a little bit more of attention to that. And I always just view them as, suggestions, not rules, so it works pretty well. And that's what I like about this, is when you go to one of these issues, which are all kind of highlighted in different colors in your text, you can decide to ignore it, or you can just kind of click on it and it will make the correction for you, which is fine. But I don't usually then use, this isn't the writing that I use that ends up on the site. I just kind of use it side by side with the text editor and make the changes myself in my original document. And then it also gives you suggestions about, or explanations as to why it thinks it should be changed. So you can kind of make an educated decision about whether it makes sense for you. So I found it works really well. On some level, I feel like, oh, why do I need a machine telling me how I should write? On the other hand, it's super easy to miss little things. And this is just to me, it's just another line of defense against that sort of thing, which is why I use it. Now, talking about the apps in particular, that's all these apps. I'll get to the one difference, but all these apps work essentially the same way. This started out as a web service. And so that UI that I just described is all in the web app, and it's been replicated in a Mac app. And the Mac app, unfortunately, is Electron. And I say unfortunately because when I open it, my fans kick up. And all I'm doing is, pasting in plain text and looking at it. But my fans tend to kick up. And I'm willing to tolerate that because, one, I don't like working in Safari tabs. And two, I'm not in Grammarly all day. I don't have the app open constantly. It's really one of the last steps before I publish something. I'll paste it in there and give it a quick check, and that's totally fine. There's also, as I mentioned, when I'm working on my Mac, there's a Safari extension, and I've really found that that's pretty good, because what it does is it gives you the same kind of highlighting and UI in text fields in web form. So, sometimes I'll be writing to a company about something, and they don't have an email address on their website. They have a form that you have to fill out with your name and your address and your message and all that. And so I'll do that. And it's just a nice way to avoid, making a silly typo with fat fingers. It's nice to have that when you're doing that sort of thing. For the longest time on iOS, all there was available was a keyboard extension, which was just awful. It's really, it wasn't really.
I remember
and it's still,
that. Yes.
yeah, and
not
it's
ideal.
still no, it still exists, and I think they should just get rid of it because you shouldn't have to use somebody's keyboard in order to get grammar suggestions. The suggestions would pop up in the little row above the keyboard, and that was no good. So I've never used that. But recently they came out with an iPad app, and it works very much like the Mac app. Looks basically the same. Works really well. It really kind of needs as much screen real estate as you can give it, though. I mean, it does work with split view, but which is handy if I'm doing like I do sometimes, which is keep my text editor open and I can kind of compare and contrast the two versions side by side. But it really needs, on the iPad Pro, it really needs like the 2/3 view in order to kind of get all the information in place without being really crammed and crowded. So it does support that. It just needs as much space as you can give it. And it works in the Safari. Safari got a big update in iOS 13 so that web apps work a lot better. The app works much better now on the web. But until this iPad app came out, that's what I was doing, and it works perfectly well there as well. So yeah, it's I think it's an interesting app that if you do any kind of writing, is worth taking a look at, especially if you're like me. I mean, Federico can attest to this, I think. I'm not super good at proofreading my own stuff. It really helps if I have someone else look at it because I am just blind to my own typos for the most part. I've gotten a little better, especially if I slow down, but I do feel better having this last line of defense that kind of catches a lot of the silly stuff very quickly. And then there's less for me to have to figure out and catch myself.
I gotta check this out again because it's not just a keyboard anymore. I remember not liking the keyboard limitation a couple of years ago, and I think you convinced me to try this for the summer as maybe like a first step before I send my drafts to Ryan for additional editing. This would be a good one, so I don't look stupid when he finds my silly typos. Yeah. I think I'm going to check this out on the iPad, not on the Mac. I don't want to install anything that is Electron on my Mac.
No, it is perfect for those little silly, stupid typos because it's the kind of thing where, you'll just, sometimes when you're editing yourself, I find that I end up a lot of times with short words that are, I duplicate them. So it'll be like the, or in sometimes. And it's usually just like a cutting an editing issue more than anything else where that happens. And commas are another one where it's a compound sentence and I just forgot to put the comma before the and or the or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's just very, very good at catching those things where you don't have, as a result, I don't have to think about those as hard when I'm proofing because a lot of times those are the hardest things to catch are just missing commas. All right, Federico. Well, that is it for today. I think those are both apps people, if they haven't tried them before, definitely check them out. Check out Castro again. That app gets updated all the time. So there are lots of nice little refinements that have been added not that long ago. So check it out, and Grammarly too. But do yourself a favor and look for a deal on the web because you can get it for cheaper than the list price.
Yeah.
In any event, I want to thank our sponsor again, and that's Mint Mobile. And of course, you can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram. He's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHN VOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.